Now, you mentioned Parliament in passing just now, and I wanted to speak a little bit about Parliament. Now, the last sitting of Parliament on November 17th saw a heated debate on this Stamp Amendment Bill 2015, which was subsequently passed. We also saw another important bill, the Small Estates Bill. Now, this received little or no debate. So tell us a little bit about what was happening in Parliament, and tell us how these bills would benefit the ordinary petition and division.
Yeah. Thank you. Part of my portfolio that I mentioned on the Ministry of Justice and Legal is also to ensure that legislative measures are prepared and brought to government, brought to Parliament on behalf of the people. And at the last sitting that you saw clearly mentioned, there were these three bills that had second and third reading that were passed into law. One was the incorporation of churches in order to do business need to actually get a statute legislation passed to allow them to do that for the Parliament. But the other two bills that were brought and had second and third readings were very, very important bills. The first one, the stamp duty bill, was one that was read back in December last year by the Douglas administration. It was in the budget for that year. And so it basically led to a process by which the payment of a stamp duty, which is basically a tax on the sale and purchase of property, would have been equalized between two different rates. Generally across the board, people paid, well, vendors of property paid 12% on the value of the property. Before, up to 2009, it was a situation in which the seller paid 6%, the buyer paid 6%. But then that was equalized. And so the 2%, the two different payments were brought into, and only the seller paid 12% in 2009. What has happened? Because the government of the day wanted to encourage condominium development, condominiums could be sold with only a stamp duty of 5%. So whereas ordinary citizens here in St. Kitts and Nevis would have to pay an additional amount to have real property, 12%. Condominiums, which generally targeted the tourist people from overseas, and in particular people within the citizenship by investment, to be able to qualify to get citizenship. There are a number of condominium projects that are already being constructed, and so the government then felt that it was achieving some of its objective, but there needed to be an equality in terms of what was paid. So that the bill, the amendment bill, was to reduce, bring down the stamp duty being paid for real estate, for property, by ordinary citizens down to 10%.
So it moved from
12 to 10 with a reduction. The condominium payments would go from 5% to 10%. So it was a question to bring fairness to the stamp, to the question of real taxes on real property. That is what the bill was about. It engendered much debate in a whole range of other things, and degenerated into conduct that many people have characterized in a number of different ways, which I won't. But I think it's important to keep focus on what had happened. I I think I should also mention a question that Dr. Douglas, leader of the opposition, asked me, and which I had to respond to, is why we only did it now in November, just a couple of weeks away, a few weeks away from having the budget, then we could introduce it again. And this is how I respond. I responded to him in Parliament, and I think I should again. What had happened is that when a measure is introduced during the budget debates and is passed, it goes into force immediately on the 1st of the month. It goes into force as it was in January the 1st. It began to go into force. But there is a law that says that you still have to go back to Parliament within 90 days to pass the measure for amendment in the law for it to become permanent. That's the first issue. And what happened, the 90 days went and it was not brought into law. So that lapsed. It was no longer part of the law. And so people who had actually paid their taxes asked back for their money and it was refunded. And so Dr. Douglas's point was, why did you have to give that money? You're now running out of money, you come back with it. But there was a very specific reason why we did not go back to Parliament with it before. And it had to do with the state of the Citizenship by Investment program in St. Kitts and Nevis. And everybody would remember that last year, May 2014, the United States government, through their Inland Revenue, whatever it is, passed a FinCEN advisory against St. Kitts and Nevis. It is a very serious sanction against our country because they said that people who were accessing our citizenship program were illicit actors. They were illegal. And they were using our citizenship to defraud and commit things. They could not be trusted. And so the United States government put that sanction against St. Kitts and Nevis. It's a very serious sanction. It is one that's still in place. We remember that in the 22nd of November, some months later, the Canadian government then came and removed our access to Canada without a visa, the visa waiver for St. Kitts and Nevis. We lost that on November 22nd. Here were these two major partners, allies of ours, who were spanking us, but more than spanking. They were sanctioning us and telling us that you all have not been proper. You're not doing the right thing. When we came into office in February of this year, we found a letter from the Secretary of State to the last Prime Minister, Dr. Douglas, sanctioning him and St. Kitts and Nevis for the conduct of our CBA program. It was, for us, very, very serious that here was St. Kitts and Nevis with this program, which for many people had been the oldest and the best, was under the scrutiny of our international partners, the US, the Canadians, the British, and the European Union. And while this was hanging over our head, the CBI had to be properly redone. We had to go and recalibrate it. We had to go and work very hard to try and recover some confidence with our international partners. And so we spent a lot of time meeting with the Ambassador of the United States, the Canadian High Commission, the British High Commission, representatives from the EU, numerous meetings and meeting with them to give these people a sense of comfort that this new administration was determined to make sure that we did put in place a proper system to the first primary objective, our first priority. And I can happy to say that I think that we did some excellent work, because we breathe with a sigh of relief that our partners see us in a much better light today than they did over the last year or so. I go further, because we held an international conference here in July at the OTI. We invited all of these people to come and speak. And the British High Commissioner, Victoria Dean, said at OTI a number of times in a presentation that Senghis Nevis needed to convince her how to convince her minister not to pull the visa-free access to the UK. Suppose they say we need a visa to go to the United Kingdom. You know what that would do to us? Huh? It was very, very serious. And so Prime Minister Harris and I, we visited the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London with that in mind. We went and had to speak to the Minister, Lord Swire, on this matter. It was something that we had to work very seriously on. While that is going on, it just didn't make sense to be talking about putting up the rates, putting up a stamp duty on the same factors that are on the country. And I should also say, while that is happening as well, our local service providers, the people who are working assiduously to develop the Citizenship Investment Program, were complaining because there had been a pullback on the processing of these applications. People all around the world were complaining that the program was not doing well. We had to strengthen the program. We have put in a lot more professional people. We have brought in people with immigration experience, financial experience, international finance, banking. We have strengthened the unit, and we have put in new software has been introduced, and now we can say that the operation has been working tremendously better. There's a lot more confidence coming from the service providers, from the developers, as how it is working. We feel that the program is back on track, and we are confident that it has regained its place as the leading program, especially in our region and worldwide, so that we are very confident with what has happened this year. Now that we're in this position, we can now give the benefits of the reduction in stamp duty for local people, when at the same time balancing off that loss of revenue with increasing it in terms of the condominium parliament. So that for me was a very, very important piece of legislation, and the debate for me was very surprising that we did so much. But Jamila, Jean, for me, equally as important, and maybe more important, was the small estates bill.
But that one was not discussed.
Well, I led it, and I did discuss it. I was seconded by the Prime Minister, who did discuss it. But surprisingly, nobody on the opposition's benches even mentioned it. And well, it's left for the public to wonder why. I was also a little surprised, though, that it did not appear in mainstream media. You know, what is the small estates bill, really? When someone dies, whatever you leave behind is part of your estate. So if you leave a house, you leave a car, you leave money in a bank. This is the estate of John Brown. And John Brown's estate needs a legal representative to be able to disburse, to distribute the estate assets that are left behind. So therefore, somebody has a mother or father who passes away, and the house is in the person's name. They just can't go to the bank and use it. They don't put a paper in it. You have to get legal documents appointing you as the representative. Now, there are 2 ways you can do it. People can prepare a will saying before they die, I would like to leave my house to my son so-and-so, or my so-so-so, whoever it is. So you probate the will to get that legal representative. If you die without a will, and it's called intestate, you then have to apply to the court. Someone has to apply to the court under the laws of intestacy, because there is an administrative law that says how it can be done. Through a lawyer, a number of documents. It can be an expensive process. Oath of this, affidavit of that, and so on. Can cost thousands of dollars to get an estate provided for. Suppose, for instance, and it does happen regularly, your mother and father passes away and have $8,000 in National Bank. You have to go to a lawyer to get it probated and administrative papers done to it. It can be expensive and time consuming. And for many people, it is very troubling. But there is a law. There was a law called the Small Estates Act, first enacted in 1944, that allows for people who have small estates, limited amount of value. So like in 1961 laws, it was at $240. At that time, that might have been a lot of money. 1970s, it had been increased to $500. And then for a number of years, it was only $500. In 1985, in the Palmer administration of the day, they went from $500 to $5,000. And $5,000 in 1985 might have seemed like a lot of money. But $5,000 30 years later ain't a lot of money. So that under the Labour administration, for the last 20 years, poor people were leaving their money in the bank. It's like just over $5,000. They can't get access to it. It don't make sense to go to a lawyer to pay them $1,000 for just to get a couple $1,000. It was troublesome. The small estates took ordinary people who don't have a whole lot of money in the bank, who might have a car valued more than $5,000. The car might walk down there because you can't get registered. You don't have the papers for it.
And you don't have the money to
You don't have the money to pay the lawyer. Okay? So what this bill does was to increase the limit for which is a small estate from $5,000 to $25,000. Okay? And what do you do if you have something that's valued less than $25,000? You can go to the court office, in the courthouse, and fill out a one-page form and pay $10 to become the legal representative of that estate, to get access to someone who has left something for you. Let me give you an example. We have had a situation over the last few months where the Sugar Workers Restoration Fund, people have died and received awards, $7,000, $8,000. But I can't pass it on. The people who applied can't get it because they're not the legal representative of the estate. And there have been lawyers who have volunteered, a couple of them have volunteered, to do the process, time consuming and awkward. And that all it needs is a form now to fill out to be able to access that money. $10. And it is, for me, a bill that is going to be very, very important to a lot of ordinary people around St. Kitts and Nevis to be able to access the inheritance from their father, their brother, their sister going forward. And I say it's very unfortunate that I've been somewhat taken aback that nobody has been discussing this and saying how critical and important it is to our people in St. Kitts and Nevis. And for me, it's something that I think as Team Unity, we are proud about this bill, working for you. Because this is one thing that could affect ordinary poor people in a very meaningful way.